kids believe in themselves and they go for their dreams. Like,
Yes.
what more could you ask for?
Mhm.
Like, even when I was a kid, my Barbies were starting businesses. Like,
I guess it helps when you don't really grow up and you still feel like a kid inside.
There's that.
We are the Front Page Pass, brought to you by Word Journeys.
yes, okay, so we will do a short excerpt from The Little Dragon, which is my newest children's book that I have out right now.
I'll hold up the illustrations while she's reading.
Okay.
Oh, that works.
All right. In a whimsical land beyond the sparkling sea lived a happy-go-lucky little dragon. He spent his days in the meadow watching the carefree clouds drift by. At night, he loved sleeping in his comfy cave and dreaming under the starry sky.
Adorable.
That's adorable.
It is.
Thank you.
The little dragon treasured time on his own, exploring, thinking, and most of all, dancing. One day, while he was in the middle of a particularly expressive dance among the daisies, he was startled to discover that he wasn't alone. Someone was watching and giggling while hiding behind a tree at the edge of the meadow. The little dragon felt scared and embarrassed. He immediately stopped and froze in place, wondering who or what was watching him and how long they'd been there. Panicked, the little dragon sensed something hot and horrible rumble in his belly. It rolled up through his chest, throat, and face. It was monstrous and overtook him as he thought about how ridiculous he must have looked dancing around, and how unfair it was not to know that someone was there.
Hmm.
Those are excellent.
His chest and face inflamed. It felt like a giant balloon was about to explode from the inside. The heat burned his eyes and nose. He opened his mouth to gasp for air, and a big curl of fire blazed out along with a mighty roar. The giggling stopped. Through the eerie silence, he could hear his heart pounding. The little dragon had never experienced this sensation before. What had just happened? He looked up and saw that he had scorched the side of a beautiful tree. He loved the flower-filled meadow. What if his angry burst of fire had burned it all away? Feeling shocked and ashamed, the little dragon ran home and curled up in his cave. He flopped down onto his cozy cushion and wrapped his long, scaly tail around himself, covering his face. What should I do? He wondered. Should I hide in this cave forever? Maybe I can move to a land far away where no one will laugh at me. But what if I leave and someone ruins my special meadow? He couldn't stand the thought of something happening to his happy place. Feeling the need to protect it, he devised a plan.
Well, Alexa, in my years of teaching and presenting at writers' conferences, of course, I meet a lot of writers and a lot of people that are at various stages of the process. Well, a little over 10 years ago in San Diego, this young lady came to the writers' conference,
Right.
and she had a background in corporate marketing, and she wanted to, she came to learn the process of being a writer, not only the process of writing or in a particular genre, but also the business of writing. And here we are a decade later, and Sheri Fink is now a multiple best-selling children's author.
Yes.
And on the other side of LA, there's a young man named Derek Taylor Kent who's just had a diverse background in acting, performing, directing, and so forth. And he became a best-selling middle grade children's book writer. So young chapter book writer. And then 5 years ago or so, they joined forces, not only as a writing team or what
Yes.
have you, but also as a couple. And from that we now come to 2021 and Whimsical World and this amazing. They're like the Scholastic Book Fair by themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Very, very talented duo. That's for sure.
That's right. So with that, we'd like to introduce Derek Taylor Kent and Sheri Fink. Thank you so much for being on Front Page Pass.
Oh,
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us, Robert.
yeah,
Yeah.
we're thrilled to be here.
And you know,
We're glad to have you guys.
yeah, and I've seen you here and there the last few years at different conferences, and of course we all keynoted together at the Missouri Writers Conference. So my first question for both of you is, going to a Whimsical World event, it's an experience. It's not a book signing necessarily. It's not just a book signing. It's not just a bunch of kids that you go and talk to or read to or sign to, but it's an experience. And so tell us a little bit about how you came up with Whimsical World, and then when the two of you got together, how you've turned it from being kind of a little kids thing to a right through elementary school event that covers all the grades.
That's a good question.
Yeah. Well, when we first met, we were both successful children's authors, and we had our own unique brands. Derek is known for his laugh out loud, make kids fall in love with reading because they're having so much fun reading, and I'm known for my social emotional learning, which empowers kids to improve their self-esteem as they're reading the books. So we took the two of those specialties and we blended them together to create something bigger and better than what we could have accomplished on our own, which we call Whimsical World. And our mission is to inspire, delight, and educate children of all ages while planting seeds of self-esteem and high achievement. And we do that through our books, through our live experiences, through our talks, through our merchandise, through everything that we do. We get to really bring that out. And like you said, we love to create an experience. So I like to say we want our experiences with our fans to be magical, meaningful, and memorable. So sometimes, I'm a mermaid. Sometimes we have a little baby unicorn there. Sometimes we have a special backdrop for a photo opportunity. We just try to really make it as immersive as possible so that the child not only has fun, but learns something, hopefully about themselves, and falls that much more in love with reading.
Before I came along, it was just the whimsical world of Sheri Fink. So when I got involved, I guess we kind of incorporated a lot of my books into it because they happened to work really well with hers in terms of the audience. I was writing picture books. I was kind of, but in totally different messaging and content. So I was kind of most well known in picture books for my bilingual books that are written in English and Spanish that kind of help kids to learn both languages. And I also was specializing in STEM books. I like science a lot, so I'd incorporate a lot of science into my books, like Simon in the Solar System. It teaches them all about the planets, and even Principal Mikey, my middle grade book, is a STEM book for the middle grade audience, like ages 7 to 12. So she had her social emotional learning and self-esteem angle. And I kind of had my educational high achievement angle that we kind of were able to weave them both together in this grand purpose of getting kids to fall in love with reading.
And also, when I first started, I was writing for ages primarily 4 to 10. And Derek was writing primarily, but he writes in so many different ages, for middle grade readers. So he had, a little bit older reader than me. And since then, since we founded the company together, we've expanded it. So we now have a baby board book. We have concept books like alphabet and counting. We have, of course, our picture books, the bilingual books for the young kids, coloring books for kids of all ages. We have the middle grade, and we've both written books for adults as well. And what we find is that as much as the kids are the fans, we have a ton of adult fans that we love that are so excited to see us when we come to events, and we always try to make it special for them as well.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you guys target all those different age groups too, because as the kid grows up, they can read each theme throughout. So it's pretty interesting. So if you guys could kind of tell me a bit about the importance of not only writing a compelling and heartfelt story, but just how showmanship kind of comes into play, with the atmosphere you two kind of create, and the illustrations, costumes, etc. Just kind of that feel you were talking about, Sheri.
Yeah. I come from a background of children's theater. I was doing children's theater for a long time. I was doing theater. I wrote and directed a musical that was kind of a family musical that ran for a while in LA called King Calamari. And I used to do public theater for kids, or we do crazy kid shows on weekends for the kids could come and attend for free just to get them exposed to theater and what that's like. So I just always loved bringing that performance angle and entertaining and making kids laugh. That's kind of why I started writing, was because I loved making my friends laugh, who were kids like me at the time. But as I grew older, I was still really good at it, making my friends laugh, but mostly making kids laugh.
Yeah, Derek's hilarious. Like,
So
kids love him. Like, he will do anything. He will fling himself onto the floor. He will make the most crazy sound
yeah.
effects when he's reading his books, you
Yeah.
know. And were you gonna say more?
Oh, I don't. Yeah. So when I brought, maybe the books were just an excuse to get to be able to perform more. Because I would do my school visits, I created whole shows around the books. Like I really don't even do readings anymore. I actually
Wow.
have a show where I do interactive choose your own adventures, where like we're making up the story as we go along, and I can incorporate some of the characters and themes from the books. But the readings were just kind of too boring for me. I wanted to do something totally different that the kids hadn't seen before. Uh, so we do that for my Scary School series and Principal Mikey. We get them to solve a mystery together, kind of just like it's like something Mikey does in the book. So this they get an idea of what it's kind of like, but not necessarily needing to just do a reading. And Sheri had an amazing show that brings a lot of emotion and messaging into it. So we're able to combine both of our strengths when we create our shows for school visits and events.
Yeah, and I think if your books pour from your heart, so should your presentation. You know, when you're speaking to
Exactly.
kids, they can tell if you aren't being genuine. They just sense it. But they look at me and they see the 8-year-old girl that I really am inside. And so it makes it fun, you know? It's like it's talking to them not as a grown-up who's like pointing the finger, do this, do that. It's more like, guys, wouldn't it be fun if blah blah blah? Like, and they're like, yeah, you know?
They pick up on it.
Yeah, well, I was telling our team here today this morning that I remember distinctly going at the LA Times Festival of Books about 3 years ago. This little, just shy as could be, little 4-year-old came up to you, and you were wearing rainbow hair that day, and she came up to you, and she was just, she wasn't really ready to make a connection with you, but she was drawn by your hair, and I just watched you draw her in, and what I watched was you become 4. And then you started telling her a little story, and all of a sudden, then she runs off, and 2 seconds later there's her mom, and they're getting ready to buy books. It was amazing. I mean, just
Aw.
and
Yeah.
it's such an experience when you two perform and you present. But Derek, I had a question for you. When I read your books, when I look at them, one thing that just strikes me is you had to be the kid in the classroom that took in everything that everyone was doing, not just what the teacher was doing, but just all the little quirky, whimsical things that other kids were doing, because it just feels like you're just, besides being in the flow of the stories, it just feels like that kid in the classroom that just observes everything. Were you that kid?
Yeah, I think so. I think about it. I was definitely always quiet and shy, uh, but I was always kind of known as the writer kid. Like I loved writing stories. That's kind of where my personality came out. It was when I was able to write and share my stories. I liked reading the dictionary in class and free reading time to learn words. But
Uh-huh.
but you are right that a
Ditto.
lot of the characters in books, especially the Scary School series, are definitely based on kids and teachers that I had. Very, very much directly so in some cases. I always have a bank of every kid teacher I ever had that I definitely draw upon when I write.
Yeah. And so your background is in children's theater. Sheri, yours is a little bit different. I know you have roots in West Virginia, which is right next to where we're
Virginia.
Virginia, excuse me. And so I guess my question and then you were in corporate marketing, and then you made your career jump, like I mentioned at the outset, about 10 years ago. Could you talk, did the whole Southern storytelling culture, did that influence you in any way? And if so, how?
I just, as a kid, I was always like making things up and telling my mom, write this down. You know, I was making little books when I was a little girl, before I knew anything. I was just telling stories. So I don't know if it was an immersion in Southern culture or if it was just a wild creative imagination, that just wouldn't quit.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I was gonna ask, do you got like what do you all do exactly to kind of get into the imaginative mindset of a child somewhat in order to capture their essence and make sure that it really resonates with the kids, which are your all's audience?
Well, I guess it helps when you don't really grow up and you still feel like a kid inside.
There's that.
That,
There's that.
that childlike nature and quality, the way you view the world. I kind of been told that my whole life, that I kind of view the world through a child's eyes. My mom was the same way. She was an artist, and
Mhm.
her whole style was called naif, which is like painting the world through a child's eyes.
Interesting.
Um, so I think that I had formative years as a kid, especially like when I was around the age 11 was kind of like my creative blossoming when
Mm.
I had an amazing teacher who would allow us to write extra credit assignments as much as we wanted to and perform skits. So like we had ongoing TV shows in the classroom that we would write and perform every day, what we were learning. And so when I'm given the opportunity to be creative, I kind of always revert back to that. I still feel like that kid inside, and so that's why
Right.
in the Scary School series, my narrator is an 11-year-old kid named Derek the Ghost. He's like an 11-year-old ghost version of me who
Mhm.
lives at Scary School. That helps me get into that character's voice and be able to uh, write like how they talk and think.
Yeah, and I think for me, I think it's similar, whereas I've never fully grown up, but it's also like I think about what are the things that I'm going through? What are the life
Mm.
experiences that I'm having? And then how would I translate that to a child? Like how could I make it friendly enough so that it's approachable,
Mm.
but understandable on their level, on the deeper level, you know? So that's why, like in my books, in the little series, there's like messages embedded that don't hit you over the head, but as you're reading and as a kid, like if you're having fun, like if you love unicorns and you pick up a unicorn book, you're just having fun, right? And you can see yourself through the eyes of the character. And my goal is that you actually discover something special about yourself as you're reading it. Just kind of like a,
Mm.
oh, oh, that is a different way of thinking about it, you know?
Yeah. And
And
I think,
hopefully that's a seed
yeah,
that grows.
Yeah.
and I just want to add that this goes a lot deeper than that. At their wedding, which four
Uh-oh.
years ago,
Getting
they
some
had a
backstory.
storybook fairy tale
Mhm.
wedding, and they actually had a unicorn there.
No kidding.
I'm not kidding.
True
Wow.
story. A real unicorn. Yeah, we had a
Adorable.
mermaid unicorn cake too.
Here's a
Wow.
picture of it. Trevor edited in this photo.
That is so
I'll send you the
funny.
photo.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, Sheri, what gave you how can you take us through the genesis of the whole whimsical world concept from when you started it before, Derek came and became your partner and your husband?
Sure. So about 10 years ago, I released my first book, The Little Rose.
Hmm.
And, I hoped for the best. I just really wanted to help kids with their self-esteem. So that book was really an anti-bullying message
Hmm.
about being a rose, even if the weeds don't understand you, always
Mm.
embracing the beautiful person you really are inside.
Definitely.
And I published that book and I thought, okay, well, that's going to be a one and done. Now I can move on to whatever my next marketing job is going to be. But then that book became a number one bestseller on Amazon in its
Mm.
category. And it stayed at number one for over 60 weeks.
Right,
Wow. Yeah,
right.
that's
That
excellent.
was
And then I
amazing.
was
Mhm.
like, okay, well, that was pretty cool. And then I kept getting another idea, and it was the little gnome. And I kept seeing his little rosy cheeks and his yellow hat in my mind's eye. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm just going to take some time and write this story and see what happens. But by the time that I was about to release the second book, I thought, well, in the marketing world, when I was working for companies, we would build a brand. There would be an
Mhm.
umbrella mission that everything that we do would fall under. And so I thought, well, what kind of brand would I want? And I said, well, I want everything whimsical. I love magical things, like that's how I choose what merchandise we create. I'm like, what do I want? I want a whimsical world lunchbox. All right, let's make that. And so as a building the brand, the first word I came up with was
Mhm.
whimsical. And I was like, okay, the whimsical world of Sheri Fink. That sounds good. All right, we'll do that. It was pretty simple.
And you've had a similarly successful career path, Derek. You've had several number one books as well as Sheri. And but you started out, correct me if I'm wrong, but you started out with scary stories, and that was published by HarperCollins, correct?
Right.
And then that was that
Excellent.
they were
Mhm.
bestsellers. And so tell us about how, like Sheri was obviously very surprised that her first book became a number one bestseller. What about you?
My books took a little bit longer. to kind of gain momentum. I had to do a lot of grassroots efforts to get them to kind of catch on and get them out there. A lot of times this happens in the publishing. When you go with a publisher, you have like a lot of high expectations, but then they may not necessarily put as much into the book as you think they will. It's because they have very, very limited budgets and resources, especially for new authors. This was my first published book. So I just kind of got out there and kind of became my own publicist, where I sent it to every reviewer out there who was reviewing books, and I started booking school visits and kind of became kind of known as like the person to go to for anyone who wanted middle grade school visits out there. I was doing them almost every day. I was running around doing these things. So I was doing that for years. And then I had my second publishing book was El Perro con Sombrero, which opened up my bilingual picture book, which opened up a whole new avenue. Now I had the younger kids, and I had so I wanted to write that because I was visiting so many schools, and so many of them were dual immersion schools. And they said they had a real need for bilingual books that were written in English and Spanish. They just didn't have them. So I realized there was a need for that. And at the same time, I happened to get our little doggy Xander. I was very inspired to write a book about him and his crazy personality. So that became a whole book series in itself.
Yeah, Derek is the hardest working traditionally published author I've ever met. He works just as hard as the indie authors, in most cases harder.
That's good. Yeah, I was gonna ask about that. It's pretty intriguing, really, because you guys kind of took two different set paths, I guess. The traditional publishing route and then the independent. So if you guys could kind of talk about the contrast of that, I guess, as far as your journeys are concerned, I'd be really interested to hear about that. Like
I think for me, like I went indie because number one, I had to do it fast, because if I had to wait to like try to woo an agent and get a publisher and do all that stuff, I was definitely going to chicken out. I knew I would. So I was like, let me just do this as quickly as I can and just get it out and see what happens, making a lot of mistakes, but, learned along the way. And I've always had this like entrepreneurial spirit. Like even when I was a kid, my Barbies were starting businesses. Like I don't know where I got it from. My parents are like, "Why can't you play like a normal kid?" but I've just always had that, and I was used to a corporate environment that had structure, and where I was helping other people sell things and make money off of it, and iterating along the way. And I thought, well, maybe I have no experience in books, but maybe I could use some of that. For the good of children. So
that marketing mindset, really.
Yeah, and I wasn't anti-traditional publishing, but I had learned a little, just enough about it to know that it was going to take a long time. And when I would ask authors off stage at conferences, like off the record, if you could do it over again, what would you do differently? Almost every single one would look over their shoulder, swear me to secrecy, and say, I would do it myself. And I was like, oh, well, maybe I could do it myself. And, and now I have my 14th book coming out in September, and it's just been my path. And it's been great because there's a lot of advantages for indie, as there are also advantages to traditional.
Right.
But, when you own your rights, you can choose what you do with it. You decide the fate of your creativity. And
and I think one of the purest and most impressive things about both of you is you both obviously have really strong inner childs, and you're just able to just carry that out and carry it forward from the heart out. And I mean, that's just wonderful, because so many other writers, even if someone's just as a kid at heart, they might get into really serious fiction or something, and it's but that's just really impressive. And I do want to tell our viewers and our listeners that Sheri and Derek are two of the hardest working authors out there. I mean, before the pandemic, you always were on the road. You always had presentations and stuff going on. And do you ever, I mean, I know you get physically tired, obviously. You can't help it with as hard as you two work. But what keeps you so inspired to keep driving so hard, even now that you're both incredibly successful at what you do?
I think it's because I think we feel like we're still actively building our brand and our business. And when we're doing the non-pandemic time shows, it feels like 2, 3 times a week. We're waking up at 4 in the morning, driving 2 to 3 hours
Right.
for this school visit and that one, or doing our long road trips for days to wherever in the country has the event we're invited to. So I think we think we have a vision for our brand, and I think we're trying to get it out there. And because we're doing this independently, we don't have the resources like the big publishers would have to get it all over the country. Knowing that we want to do that, I think it motivates us to get up and do all these as many events as we can.
Yeah, and we're creators at heart. We each have
Mhm.
a whole list of projects that are waiting in our pipelines that we're just like, okay, well, once we get this book out, like we already know what's coming in 2023. Like
Mhm.
Wow.
we already know. We've already planned it out.
You
Like
guys are never
because we
short on
just
inspiration.
yeah, it's
That's
just
awesome.
when like on days when I feel like, you know
Mhm.
what, I'm tired, I want to stay in
Mhm.
bed and whatever. I think about like, you know what, when I get up in the morning and I
Mhm.
do my job, kids believe in themselves and they go for their dreams. Like,
Yes.
what more could you ask for, right? Like it's
Right.
motivation. It's like, oh, of course I can do it. And if I can do it, they can do it too.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And then, kind of going to the kids side of things, what for a question for each of you? What are one or two of the most just heartfelt, meaningful experiences that you've ever had with a kid and interactions with a kid, whether it be reading along with them or doing something at one of your events? What just stands out for you is just something that blew you away?
Oh my gosh, I'm already tearing up. Well, before the pandemic happened, I was volunteering to go to the children's pediatric ICU at Children's Hospital.
Mm,
And I would go room to room to the kids who were in isolation. And I had been going for years. And so, to the point where sometimes the nurses would ask the family, like, oh, is it okay? Do you mind if this patient is receiving chemo while you're in the room?
mm,
And I was just so honored,
Mhm.
like what a special moment to be helping a child. So there was one particular kid who had been in the hospital forever. Like I had been going for years, and I swear she was there all the time. And
Oh.
she had almost all of my books. She had all but two,
Mhm.
and I like made sure I brought the one that she didn't have. And I went in, and she was in a situation where you had to have a mask, a gown,
Mhm.
gloves, all those things, which make it super hard because I'm in a wig as well, and I'm trying to read a book and I'm trying to turn the pages with the gloves and I've got the mask and I'm just like, oh my God, I hope I'm not blowing this for this poor little girl. Like I really want it to be good for her. And so I read her the story and I gave it to her and her grandfather, he was like, oh, thank you so much. And I left the room, and you have to dispose of everything before you leave the room because it's, to avoid contamination. And I came out in the hallway and I was reading to another child, and I came out of that room, and her grandfather was standing out there, and he said, oh, I'm so sorry to bother you, but would you mind coming back and taking a photo with her? It would be so
Oh.
mm.
special. And I was like, oh, I don't mind at all. So I went back and I put the mask, put new mask on, put the new gloves on, put the gown on. I was like, 10 minutes later, I'm getting the
Totally worth it
picture.
though.
And her mom, he sent it to her mom, and she posted it on Facebook, and she said that her daughters had such a challenging journey. And
Mhm.
like having me pop in and see her at the hospital, like just brightened her day so much. Like she kept talking about it on the phone with her that night. And I like the next time that I went, I didn't get to see that girl, but I knew she was there and I knew which book she was missing. So I went after I did my visit, I went all the way back to the parking lot, which was a hike there.
Mhm.
And I got the book and I gave it to my handler at the hospital and I said, please make sure she gets this book. I signed it, personalized it for her. So now she has the whole collection, you know.
Awesome.
So that I don't know. There's just so many things that are special about that people just don't see. We
Hmm.
don't post about everything that we do,
Mhm.
but that moment has just really stayed with me. I'm still emotional about it, even just now.
That's understandable. We
Yeah.
are just hearing about it, so I mean,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
And how about you, Derek?
I think my favorite thing that I hear sometimes, whether people email me or come find me at shows, is that uh, parents will oftentimes write to me and say, you know what, like my kid hated reading. I couldn't get them to read no matter what, but then they read Scary School or Principal Mikey or
Mhm.
whatever my book was, and now I can't get them to stop reading. They realize that books can be fun and funny. And that's kind of how I that was like my ultimate goal with these books. 'Cause I was kind of a reluctant reader at first myself until I realized that until I found the right books that spoke to me or that made me laugh. So I just love humor so much, and so I wanted to make kids just laugh like crazy reading books.
Yeah.
That just puts the positive association in their brain that reading can make them feel good and make them learn fun things, make them happy. You know, it doesn't have to be a chore or an assignment. You know, reading should be fun, and that just sets them up for a lifetime of reading success and life success, I think.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, like you, well, I wasn't a reluctant reader. I started reading when I was 4 and I fell in love. And I was, I was a little kid at the summer reading club that filled my arms and my mother's with books and made her, 6-year-old little kid making his mom just pile up and leave, trying to win that summer reading contest. But one thing that strikes me about you, both of you, is in a certain way is, 20 years ago when the Harry Potter series came out, J.K. Rowling by herself reinvigorated reading for millions, of kids. And then of course they became movies. But you, in a certain way, you remind me of that because I just look at your books, respective age groups and so forth. And I would think if I'm a kid, it's impossible to not want to read one of your books. And that's saying a lot in this day and age of streaming and screens and
Right.
phones and everything else.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I kind of want to ask a little bit of the technical aspects and ask a little bit about your all's writing processes. So, do you guys really plan each book out from the beginning, kind of have a set path? Do you start out with a specific character or a theme? I mean, how exactly does that unfold? Does the book just kind of flesh itself out, or do you guys have like a set?
Let's see. I think it can depend. I definitely love to plan and beat sheet and outline as much as possible before I start writing, especially my novels. A lot of times I'll start with a title. It seems like a lot of Scary School, My Homework Ate My Dog, even Principal Mikey, I think all started with like a title coming into my head and then kind of asking just a series of questions around that, like a scary school, like, oh, why would a school be scary? Why, how would that work? What kind of monsters would be there? Would there be kids, human kids there too? Why would they let this happen?
Who's the staff there?
What if teachers ate the kids? Oh, that'd be kind of funny if you think about it. So I kind of think I ask questions and try and find the humorous angle to it. And yes, I love spending, I'll usually spend even a lot more time beating it out before I actually start writing. So the writing process is a lot easier for me if I have everything I know exactly what's going to happen, while giving myself the freedom to veer off from it if I have a different or interesting idea while I'm going.
Yeah, Derek is definitely a plotter, and I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum. I'm a pantser, so I fly by the seat of my pants. But I do start with the character. Like I know what the character is going to be, and sometimes I'll have a feel for what the message is going to be, but sometimes I don't. I just start writing and I'm like, oh, it's about adaptability and looking for the good in change. That's cool, But my newest one that's coming out in September, which I haven't announced the title yet, which will be announced shortly after this interview airs. Parents were writing to me during the pandemic early on and saying, my kids are all of a sudden afraid of the dark. Do you have anything for them? And I was like, well, I have something about being afraid and being embarrassed and that kind of thing. But I started thinking like, okay, well, what could I write that would be super fun about being afraid of the dark? And I came up with the idea of what if it was a little monster and he's afraid of the dark, right?
Wow, that's great.
And like, what if he had to learn to have fun in the dark and to relax and sleep in his own room for the first time, And how can I make that super fun? So one of the things that's going to be a feature of that book is that it glows in the dark. So, so think about it, like you're reading it with a child, right? Holding a flashlight on the page. And the kid is going to say, turn the light out, because after each page, because they want to see what glows on it. So it's like a ninja move to help kids start wanting to have the light off.
Psychology went into that. It seems like.
Yes.
Well, it's hard to imagine that as awesome as Sheri and Derek are live and doing these presentations. And I mean they are really booked. When they're out and about, they're totally booked. It's really hard to get a date with them. But but it's hard to believe you've been off for 16 months because of the pandemic. Well, this weekend, June 26th and 27th, I believe, they're going to be in Denver, Colorado. This is going to be their first big event in that
Right.
long. And could you tell us a little bit about that? And you two must be just jumping out of your seats, excited to be back out on stage.
Yes, it is the Unicorn Festival, and I like to say it's the most magical event in North America. And it's going to be so awesome, not only because we're headlining it, but also because one of my favorite authors as a kid is co-headlining it.
Oh
Wow.
wow.
And who
Yes,
is that?
Stephen Cosgrove.
Okay.
He's the author of Morgan and Me, which is his famous unicorn book, and
Hmm.
Leo the Lock, which was my favorite book. And I'm super excited to meet him in person for the first time. We've exchanged emails, and I just can't wait to buy all of his books in person. And we also, so in addition to having a cool pop-up shop with all of our whimsical merchandise and books and meet and greets and readings and all the standard things that we bring, we are also going to have a corral next to our shop that has a little unicorn that's
Oh,
just,
geez.
Oh, that's
looks
cute.
just like the character from my book.
The one right behind you there.
Yeah, yeah, and right behind us too.
Yeah,
there. Yeah, it looks like we have almost mirror image backdrops here in a certain, well, kind of, not quite, but same idea. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I
This
love
is
the
super exciting. This is my first time at the festival. Sheri did it a couple years ago, and I couldn't go that time. So it was her first time doing a show without me since we've been together.
Mm-hmm.
But it was so great. He said, like, you have to go next time. You absolutely cannot miss it. So like I staked it out and made sure nothing was possibly scheduled for this weekend, so I could do it this time. And I'm so excited to be there. I'll be doing some shows. I'm in like they're doing a spooky stories shows they'll be doing. Sheri will be doing some readings and presentations as well.
In the Storybook Cottage,
In the
and
story.
it's just so cool. Like kids can go and they meet unicorns, so they buy a ticket, and it gives them admission to the entire event. So everything that there is to do, except obviously buying merchandise or food, is covered.
Hmm.
So when I went last time, there was face painting. I don't know if that's going to be happening because of the pandemic, but there's multiple unicorn opportunities. The last time I went, I got to ride a unicorn.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was the best. I got to be a mermaidicorn on the Denver 9 News,
Mermaidicorn.
promoting the festival. It's just ridiculous. Like, if
That's
people can
great.
come, they should definitely come. It'll be worth it. It's all outdoors,
Wow.
very spacious, open air, and everyone's just so happy. They're excited to be there and celebrate magic.
And Derek, with your background in children's theater, I mean, that just gives you an unfair advantage in writing children's characters, I got to say, because doesn't take too much for you, I'm sure, to get into their characters and be that character. But could you talk a little bit about how children's theater helped you become such a good character-based author?
I think the main thing being in children's theater helped me with was understanding how to create shows and experiences that were interactive. Because when adults think of theater, they just think of sitting in a seat and having to be very quiet and watching a show, and that's just not where kids' minds are. It's just not something they can do. And like we try and teach it to them, but it's just not in their nature. Like they want to be involved
Mhm.
and they want to help. When they see a problem out there, like they want to shout out the answer to them and help the characters. So I try and make them as interactive as I can, and then I also I think that helped me understand the idea of the value of extending the book experience beyond the book. So when you get to the end of my books, that's not where the story ends. It always has a special secret little thing they can go to at the end that takes them to a website where they can play games, solve more puzzles, ideas to write to me, unlock secret chapters. So I'm always trying to extend the experience beyond the book as much as I can. And in creating characters, I think it helps you when you just push in children's theater, the characters are always very big, very silly. You're always trying to gauge, what kind of reaction you want to get. If you want a kid to laugh at a character, you want them to boo at the bad guy. So you're always kind of, ways to exaggerate characters so kids know how to feel about them and not, have a have like necessarily the complexities that it would in like a grown-up novel where they're
Right.
having to really dissect things and figure out everyone's intentions. Um, yeah, I think
Almost like a goofy caricature of real life
Yeah.
experiences, so the kid can pick them up. Yeah.
And another part of your background, Derek, we haven't even talked about yet, is you're a screenwriter who's had several had several screenplays optioned. Can you tell us about that for a second?
yeah, I think it's all part of my big writing banner. I have one a horror movie that's in pre-production right now. So I guess I can because I know how to write horror from my kids' angle, but then it was like taking another step and making it maybe it's something more in the traditional horror genre was something that was fun to do. I like to write comedy still best of all, though
Oh.
I had a screenplay called Cupids that was optioned by Duncan Jones's company, who did World of Warcraft,
Uh-huh.
Wow.
Source Code.
Okay.
So that's kind of a romantic comedy, but also very high concept and imaginative, kind of like my books are.
Yeah, Derek is brilliant. He is super humble, but he is so creative across the board. Like from the kitchen, like he's like an amazing home chef. He's got all these incredible recipes, and I'm pescatarian, so he will make them pescatarian friendly for me
Oh.
in such creative, amazing ways. The best food I've ever eaten. So during the pandemic, I did not suffer. Like I didn't have
Right.
those restaurants.
Yeah.
I
You're your own
was very
personal
lucky.
chef.
And he even writes music. Like Derek wrote me a song for our anniversary a few years ago. He played instruments on it. He hired a producer. He had our friends sing backup vocals on it. Like
Wow.
he made a music video. Like he's incredible. He does the editing for our audiobooks and our video books that we do called Bedtime Stories. He adds all these sound effects and music. He's just uber talented in every creative way. It's very inspiring to be around him every day.
You too.
And as I said at the outset of the show, these two, when they're at a school, it's like the Scholastic Book Fair by themselves.
Yes, exactly.
But I think I was selling you both short after hearing all of this.
Yeah,
I think
package completely.
between the two of us, I think it's 25 titles.
Yeah.
Wow.
We're trying to do 4 or 5 a year, though. In a normal
Wow.
That's
Depending, yeah.
In between all your engagements, now that you get to go back out on the road.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, what was it like throughout your all's journey in the publishing world? I guess to kind of break through that threshold, and really start seeing success after struggling, triumphant, etc. So, what was that like exactly?
I think it's still, to me, it kind of still feels the same. Like there's more books on the table, but I'm still scared every day. I still really want my words to have an impact. And I think it's
Yeah.
good that there's a level of nervousness about that because kids can relate to that. If I come out and I say, you guys, I'm so excited to be here, but I'm feeling really nervous. Can anybody else relate to that? Like, I
Huh.
think people know, like, even though you've had success with books and people like them, you always want them to fall in love with the new child too. You still
Exactly.
have that. Not that you need them to love it, but the most important thing is that we love it. And if we have the creative integrity in the book and we feel really excited about it, then chances are other people are going to feel excited too. And that helps me kind of overcome the scary feelings of
Yes.
like, oh my gosh, like I got to talk about myself again, or like, I think most writers are introverts, so sometimes it's like, oh, I'm a little uncomfortable, but that's the best place to be, right? Because that's where you
Mhm.
grow.
That's true.
Yeah.
For me, it was definitely, it felt like a very long, hard struggle. Like I was writing children's books pretty seriously since I was 15 years old.
Yes.
I started off writing kind of long, epic Dr. Seussian style stories. Imagine Dr. Seuss, but like epic long stories. And I thought that was going to be my big ticket, but it's like, there's like, this is way too long for a children's book, a picture book, which is kind of like the style you're writing in. But I was so focused on that. And so those weren't going anywhere. And finally, when Harry Potter came out, the first time I read Harry Potter, I was in right after college, and I was like, oh, this is what I need to be doing. I was kind of too reliant on needing illustrations because like I cannot draw at all.
Something you can't do, really?
Yeah, he really
Do
can.
something else.
Yeah, no, not that good.
It's kind of
I
a
can
good
doodle,
segue.
but
Yeah.
That's what I need to do. I need to do something where I can just write my own, create my own worlds and write my own stories that don't need anyone else's help, you know? So I started writing my middle grade books in my mid 20s and stuff, and spent years kind of like editing them and trying to get them and find the right people
Right.
to get them in a place where I thought they were ready to be submitted. And then after that, it took years to finally get an agent. And I didn't get my first publishing deal until I was 30. Imagine that, like I had the books and I was really, that's like 15 years of me thinking it was going to happen any day now. Then of course in traditional publishing, they have a long schedule. So got the deal when I was 30. It didn't come out till I was 32.
Right.
So I had another 2
Right.
years of just of waiting and waiting or waiting around, and writing the other books in the series under contract. Luckily, that gave me something to do, but I felt like that was a long. I put in my dues, and I'm learning the craft, and I was doing a lot of theater at the time, and thinking that might be where I go. I didn't really know what was gonna happen, but once that happened, I was decided to make that my focus.
All right.
That's excellent. Yeah,
Covers.
it's gonna be a good segue. Yeah, I was gonna ask about that. So, as someone who is a children's book illustrator myself, I was curious on what your all's process is, kind of picking out an illustrator, because obviously the writing has to be compelling and speak for itself and really reach the child. So, I'm kind of curious. Obviously, I went through your all's books and I was thoroughly impressed with the illustrators you all picked. So, I was kind of curious on what that whole process was like for you, and how you guys pick an illustrator out, essentially.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I didn't know that you were an illustrator. That's so
Yeah.
cool. It's
Yeah, that's
always
kinda-
nice to know talented people.
Thank you.
Well, for me, like when I first started, I had no idea what I was doing, right? And I knew I needed a really talented artist. So I asked everyone that I knew, who do you know who might illustrate books or know something about art or be interested in this project? And then I went down the list and I talked to each one of them and I said, well, this is what I'm trying to do. I want to, help kids with their self-esteem. I have this
Right.
children's book, would you do a sketch, a character sketch? And so I gave, and they had a deadline. So some people missed the deadline. They didn't tell me they were going to miss it, so they were automatically out, right? Because if they can't negotiate a deadline, because I would have extended it, but if they can't let me know in advance, that shows that there's not going to be good enough communication. Keep in mind, it came from the business world, so I had that kind of perspective on it,
Absolutely.
business
Yeah.
relationship. And then once I got the sketches, it's like if I had feedback on it, if they could take that feedback and then convert it into something magical, then that was great. But not everybody could do that, like I said, I really want this, there's a moment in The Little Rose where she's so disappointed, she feels so down because she's not seen for who she really is. Like she thinks she's the weed and she feels terrible about it. And but I need the energy of the illustrations to remain hopeful, I need the child to never feel emotionally abandoned, right, as the character. So not everyone can do that. Like someone came up with almost a Tim Burton-esque look. And I'm like, well, that's really cool, but that's not the energy of this book.
Exactly.
So the artist who did the artwork for my first 4 or 5 books, Mary Erickson Washam, she did thumbnail sketches of the whole book of The Little Rose. And when I saw that, I thought, I have to work with her. Like, this is amazing. Like, she gets it, And so for the first 5 books, we created magic together. And then we started producing more books per year. And we needed a faster turnaround time, So we started looking for a team, like a studio, that could, if someone was sick or someone, was out for whatever reason, another person could jump in and keep the project rolling along. But we'd have a project manager, a dedicated person that we would talk to. So it wouldn't be like we had to start over each time, with a new person. As far as we are concerned, we're dealing with the one person and then they're talking to the team. So we found this amazing team. They're based in Macedonia. They were previously known as Lynx Studios. Now they're Bright Jungle Studios. And we have done so many books together. I've referred so many people to them because they are great. Like they know what they're doing. They do the cover art, the interior layout, all of the pre-press work they had done for the previous books. And it just was such a huge time saver for us because now that we're producing more than 1 book a year, we have timetables like we have to stick to in order to hit, especially now with the pandemic, because printing is a whole wild card situation. Like you got to get your book in super early because you don't know when you're actually going to have it in your hand.
Right.
Very
So,
true.
So it's been really great working with them because they were able to kind of go with that flow. And the reason I knew that of their existence was because a friend of mine had hired them to do her illustrations. And they had actually, for her book, done like 3 different angles of a scene. And I thought, what a cool thing to be able to turn the camera around, like, and look at this
Absolutely.
thing. And so I knew that they could handle, a level of sophistication that not every illustrator who's just starting out has. Um, so yeah, we've been really, really thrilled with them.
Yeah, with the traditional publishing, I had no say in the matter.
Exactly.
Who my
Right,
illustrator
right.
I
was.
know.
They have their own people they want to work with, but luckily they chose amazing people for both Scary School and El Perro con Sombrero. Like I couldn't be happier with the work they did. For my first books, yeah, like I had a friend who I loved their art, who kind of did very cool little whimsical things. Who did my first picture book that I independently published was Simon in the Solar System.
Hmm.
A girl named Mary Gutfleisch did it, who became like the most popular YouTube artist named
Yes.
Mary Doodles. And then I've done a lot of books with her. Like she introduced me to the animation studio. But then like some projects, like I feel like need a different kind of touch than that. So for next spring, I'm working with a great artist named Travis Hansen on a book of poetry, kind of like a Shel Silverstein book of funny
Oh,
poems
neat.
that we're collaborating on together. So you never know. You got to feel like these companies write for a lot of books, but sometimes I feel like I want a different kind of interpretation on things.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think that the thing about both your book covers, both all of your book covers, but each of you is the type of writing you do. These covers jump off the shelf. I
They
mean,
do.
that's all there is to it. You look at any of your books, either of you, and you just want to buy it. And and I know, and Sheri's probably heard me say this before at writers' conferences. Um, a lot of people don't know that the cover is at least 50% of a buying decision, and that doesn't matter whether you're buying a children's book or a memoir.
It is true.
And it's really difficult sometimes to get authors to understand that, independent authors. And but your covers are just amazing. I mean,
I
I
found
can't
out
I
that
can't say enough about them.
I found out that I loved art directing. It's something I haven't done before, but like the art directors
Yeah.
Mhm.
in the process, and like really, I get very detailed in my illustration notes. So like so you don't have to do a lot of edits and save a lot of time. So I'm very detailed in them about the cover and the interior art, what should be, what my vision is, and what the characters look like and where they're placed. So I love that part of it. It's like a whole other part of the creative process that we get to be involved in now that I realize that I really love.
Yeah.
Well, and
And
that's something about both of you also that I've come to know over the years is when you're out on stage, you're two kids having fun with kids and having the interactive experience with kids and stuff. But you also are both incredibly detail conscious and oriented. And I mean that's the difference between great and good right there.
Absolutely.
How
That speaks
detail
volumes.
oriented you are. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
'cause
anyways, it's very hard to believe, but we are out of time.
Yep.
Oh.
I can't. Yeah.
Unfortunately,
We've already covered an hour.
I
It's
could go
just-
all day.
yeah.
It's
Anyways,
been so fun.
once again, you can find Sheri and Derek's books on, of course, Amazon and other online booksellers. Their website is whimsicalworld.com. They also have
Whimsical World
individual sites.
Whimsicalworldbooks.com.
I'm sorry,
you.
whimsicalworldbooks.com, and then we have DerekTaylorKent.com and SheriFink.com. So they have individual websites as well. And once again, they will be appearing this weekend in Denver at the Unicorn Festival. They're headlining, which is absolutely amazing. And to both of you, thank you so much for joining us. And we were wondering if you could leave us by reading a minute or two from each of your books, just to give us an experience of our own.
Sure.
I thought I'd read you guys a little bit from my newest middle grade, My Homework Ate My Dog.
That's a great title. I mean, when I saw that book, I had to look at it twice and
I
going,
did too.
did they mess up the title?
Oh no. Yes, this one's exciting. This one just won a book award for best middle grade fiction of 2020.
Congratulations.
Award.
Mhm.
So let's see. All right. Chapter 4, The First Day of School.
Oh.
Monday morning, the first day of 6th grade. My digital watch read 7:52 a.m. School started at 8 a.m., but the halls were empty. I stepped into room 4B. Uh-oh. The first thing I noticed was that every boy was wearing gray shorts, a white-collared shirt, black dress shoes, and a red tie. The girls looked the same, except in a gray dress. There I was, ripped blue jeans, old sneakers, X-Men t-shirt. Not good. There was only one desk open in the middle of the room. I was 8 minutes early, but apparently I was the last one to arrive. All the boys' hair was perfectly trimmed without one hair out of place. The girls had matching haircuts with bangs down to the middle of their foreheads. The ends were cropped evenly above their shoulders. I personally gave up on my hair long ago. It curls as tight as stretched ribbon and froze out into a perfect woolly dome, no matter what I do. The one good thing about my puffy hair is that it creates the illusion that I'm about 3 inches taller. That works out well, seeing as I'm about 2 inches shorter than most boys my age. I sat down and introduced myself to a neatly combed blonde kid sitting next to me. Hi, I'm Rudy Berkman. I know, I'm Bobby Waverly. I saved that seat for you. Thanks. Wait, you're my neighbor. Yes, my father told me to look out for you, and I have done so. Strange kid. Hey, I whispered, I didn't know the school had a uniform. It doesn't. This is how we like to dress. I laughed loud. What's so funny, Bobby asked, completely serious. You're kidding, right? No kid would wear a tie because he wants to. Well, I do. We all do, right? Together, the whole class said, Yes, Bobby. This was creepy. I noticed everyone was sitting up straight in their desks with their hands folded. Not one student was talking, chattering, giggling, eating glue, or doing anything. Don't worry, said Bobby. Soon you'll be like us.
Thank you for joining us at Front Page Pass, where we present everything from new titles to rocking interviews with best-selling authors and publishing experts, writing and editing tips, the latest on the bookshelves for readers, and live coverage of writers' festivals, conferences, and author signings. Our mission: to serve up the world in a thrilling, wonderful, and most adventurous new way.